I should have realized something was wrong the moment the counselors refused to let us keep our own watches. They smiled when they collected them, saying camp was about living in the moment. But by the third day, I caught two counselors arguing because one insisted it was Thursday, while the other swore it was only Tuesday. That wasn't even the strangest part. I was 15 when my parents signed me up for a 2-week summer camp. It wasn't a survival camp or one of those military-style places. It advertised itself as a leadership retreat. No phones, no electronics, just hiking, canoeing, team games, and building confidence. It sounded boring. My parents thought it would help me get out of the house. When we arrived, everyone was friendly. There were around 50 campers split into small cabins with 4 kids each. The counselors were all in their early 20s, cheerful enough to seem genuine. The camp director introduced himself on the first night. "I only have one rule," he said with a smile. "Trust the schedule." Everyone laughed. He didn't. That sentence stuck with me because he repeated it every day. Whenever someone asked what time lunch was, trust the schedule. When someone asked when parents would visit, trust the schedule. Even when a counselor questioned changing activities because of rain, trust the schedule. It became almost robotic. At first I thought it was just their camp slogan. Then little things started bothering me. Every morning we lined up before breakfast while counselors checked attendance using printed sheets. One morning I watched a counselor whisper to another, "Cabin 7 has 5 today." The other counselor frowned. It always had 5. "No, yesterday there were 4. They both looked toward our cabins before quickly pretending nothing had happened. My cabin had 4 people. Me, Jordan, Eli, Trevor, no one else. That afternoon I asked Jordan if he'd noticed anything weird. He shrugged. "Honestly, yesterday I could have sworn there was another bunk here." He laughed after saying it. "So weird." I laughed too. But later that night I counted. 4 bunks, 4 backpacks, 4 campers. Still, one mattress had fresh wrinkles like someone had just gotten up. The camp had an old administration building. Nobody was allowed inside except staff. It wasn't abandoned. People constantly went in and out carrying folders. Every evening, a counselor wheeled a locked filing cabinet into that building. Not laptops, paper files. Who keeps paper files locked up at summer camp? On the 5th, or maybe 6th day, depending on who you believed, we had free time near the lake. I wandered farther than I should have and found a maintenance shed behind a row of trees. The door wasn't locked. Inside were normal supplies, rakes, paint cans, life jackets. Then I noticed a cardboard box labeled "Returned Items." Inside were phones, wallets, watches, neatly organized in plastic bags. Mine was there. So were everyone else's. I almost grabbed it. Then I heard voices outside. I ducked behind shelves. 2 counselors walked in. One sighed. "They're asking questions again." The other answered quietly. They always do around this point. "Director wants another adjustment tonight." My stomach tightened. Adjustment? What if someone notices? They never notice everything. They walked out carrying a stack of folders. I waited nearly 10 minutes before sneaking back to camp. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I saw flashlights moving between cabins. No shouting, no emergencies. Just counselors quietly entering each cabin, one by one. They stayed only a minute, then moved to the next. I pretended to be asleep when ours opened. A flashlight swept across our faces. One counselor whispered, "Still 4. The other replied, "No, count again." I kept my breathing steady. After another few seconds, they left. None of my cabin mates woke up, or pretended not to. The next morning, something changed. Jordan greeted me like we'd never spoken before. Not rude, just blank. I mentioned the maintenance shed. He stared at me. "What shed?" "The one near the trees." "There isn't one." He walked away. I stood there wondering if he was messing with me. Except everyone acted the same. conversations we'd had yesterday were suddenly gone. Inside my cabin, Eli asked if it was our first full day. I laughed. It isn't. He looked confused. I think it is. No one agreed on how long we'd been there anymore. That afternoon, I finally checked the schedule posted outside the dining hall. Every page listed. Day 3. Not day 4, not day 7, just day 3. I asked a counselor why. She smiled. It helps keep everyone focused. That answer made no sense. I decided to get my watch back. After lights out, I slipped away. The maintenance shed was exactly where I'd left it, except the box of returned items was gone. Instead, there were dozens of cardboard archive boxes, each one labeled with years. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened one. Inside were camper files, medical forms, emergency contacts, evaluation reports. Every camper had one, including me. I flipped through mine. Most pages were normal. Then I reached the last sheet. At the top it read, Behavioral Observation Log. Below were handwritten notes, displays independent thinking, questions timelines, attempts to verify information, likely to influence peers. At the bottom, recommend separation before departure. I froze. Footsteps echoed outside. I shoved everything back and climbed behind stacked boxes. Someone entered. It wasn't a counselor. It was the camp director. He carried another folder. He opened a filing cabinet and placed it inside. I waited until he left before crawling out. That's when I noticed the cabinet drawer he'd forgotten to close. Inside were photographs, not camp photos. Pictures taken from hidden angles. Campers eating, sleeping, talking, crying. Every photo had names and notes written underneath. One picture showed my cabin, only there were 5 boys standing outside. I recognized 4. The 5th one, I had absolutely no memory of. His face meant nothing to me. Yet underneath the photo were all 5 names, mine included. The next morning, buses arrived. Parents were early. Everyone cheered. I almost ran to my mom. Before I reached her, the director stopped me. Everything okay? I nodded. He smiled. You had a wonderful 2 weeks. 2 weeks? I wanted to argue. Instead, I just walked away. During the drive home, my mom kept talking about how much more confident I seemed. Then she casually asked, "Did you ever find that nice boy you kept mentioning in your letters?" I turned toward her. "What boy?" She looked confused. "The one from your cabin." "I never wrote letters." She glanced at me. "Of course you did. 3 of them." When we got home, she pulled them from a kitchen drawer. They were handwritten, signed with my name. The handwriting was unmistakably mine. Every letter described camp. Every letter mentioned my 4 cabin mates, except there were 5 names, not 4. One name appeared in every letter. A boy whose face I couldn't remember. The final letter ended with one sentence I have absolutely no memory of writing. If I stop mentioning Noah, please don't assume I forgot him. I searched every yearbook, every camp photo, and every social media page connected to that camp. There was never a camper named Noah. The camp closed permanently 8 months later after an unrelated financial investigation. Its records disappeared. Last year, I finally opened the envelope containing the medical paperwork my parents had received after camp. Tucked behind the forms was a single page they had never noticed. It wasn't addressed to them. It was an internal staff checklist. Next to my name, one box had been checked. Memory adjustment, successful. The box beneath it was left unchecked. Subject still recalls Noah. The first time I realized something was wrong at summer camp wasn't because someone disappeared. It was because I found my own name crossed off an attendance sheet while I was standing right in front of the counselor. I laughed and told him he'd made a mistake. He looked at me for a second, quietly drew a check mark next to my name again and said, "You're not supposed to see that list." At the time, I thought he meant I'd spoiled some boring administrative paperwork. I wish that had been true. My parents sent me to a 2-week leadership camp the summer before my junior year. It wasn't in the middle of nowhere like horror movies make camp look. There were paved roads, a nurse's office, sports fields, a dining hall, and cabins spread across several acres of woods. Everything looked completely normal. The counselors were college students. The director had run the camp for almost 20 years. The place even had excellent online reviews. Nothing about it felt dangerous. Every morning started exactly the same. Wake up, breakfast, cabin inspection, attendance, then activities. The attendance always seemed unnecessarily serious. Each counselor carried 2 clipboards. One stayed visible, the other never left their side. Whenever campers joked around during roll call, counselors ignored them until both lists matched. I noticed it because everyone else treated attendance like it mattered more than anything. About 4 days into camp, my friend Mason got sick during breakfast. Nothing dramatic. He just looked pale. The nurse told him to stay inside for the day. When our counselor checked attendance before hiking, she looked at both clipboards. She frowned. Then she quietly erased Mason's name from the second clipboard. Not the first, only the second. I asked why. She smiled. Different paperwork. That was all she'd say. That afternoon, we came back from hiking earlier than expected because of rain. As everyone rushed toward the cabins, I noticed the counselor had accidentally left one clipboard on a picnic table. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up. The front page looked normal. Then another sheet slipped loose. Across the top it read, Secondary Accountability Log. Every camper's name appeared beside 3 empty boxes. One column said present, one said verified. The last one said recovered. Recovered. Before I could read further, the counselor grabbed it from my hands. Her smile disappeared. You weren't supposed to touch that. I apologized. She walked away without another word. After that, things changed. Not openly, just enough to notice. Whenever groups were assigned, I always ended up with different counselors. They started asking me strange questions. Do you ever sleepwalk? Have you ever wandered away from home? Do you remember directions well? It felt less like camp and more like someone filling out a psychological survey. 3 nights later, we played Capture the Flag after dark. The camp divided into 2 teams. Everyone wore glow sticks. Counselors stayed around the edges with flashlights. Halfway through the game, I chased another camper through a section of trees I'd never been in before. He disappeared behind a hill. When I followed him, I found a chain link fence. Behind it stood 6 identical white trailers. No signs, no lights, just trailers. One door was open. Inside, I could see folding tables covered with radios, maps, and stacks of binders. It looked more like an emergency operations center than camp storage. Then someone shouted, There he is. Not excited, annoyed. 2 counselors came jogging toward me. One grabbed my shoulder. We've been looking everywhere. I've been gone maybe 30 seconds. They exchanged a quick glance. Neither answered. Instead, they walked me straight back to the game. The next morning, everyone acted strangely around breakfast. People kept asking where Tyler was. No counselor answered. Finally, one said, He's with medical staff. Simple enough. Except Tyler walked into lunch 2 hours later looking perfectly healthy. When someone asked if he was feeling better, he frowned. What are you talking about? You missed breakfast. I was here. Everyone at my table looked confused. 5 of us clearly remembered his empty seat. Tyler insisted he'd never left. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 1 in the morning, I heard engines, not cars. Generators. I looked through the cabin window. The white trailers I'd found earlier had their lights on. People wearing reflective safety vests, not camp uniforms, were unloading equipment. One trailer had a giant county emergency management logo on the side. I thought maybe there'd been an accident nearby. The next morning, everything was gone, like it had never been there. I finally asked one of the older counselors what those trailers were. He stared at me. What trailers? The ones behind the fence. There isn't a fence. His answer came too fast, too rehearsed. On the second to last day, a storm rolled through. Not severe, just heavy rain. Activities moved indoors. Around lunchtime, every counselor suddenly received a radio call. Their expressions changed immediately. One of them stood on a chair. "Everyone stay exactly where you are." Nobody laughed. Nobody questioned it. Within seconds, counselors started counting campers. Again and again. Then they counted us by cabin. Then alphabetically. Then individually. It lasted almost 40 minutes. You could hear panic in their voices. Eventually, the director announced, "Situation resolved." Nobody explained what had happened. Camp continued like normal. Months later, I forgot about most of it. School started. Life moved on. Then one evening, my dad was watching local news. A headline caught my attention. A chemical transport truck had overturned near the county where our camp was located. The reporter said something strange. The county emergency office had recently praised several local camps for participating in an annual evacuation readiness program. Our camp's name appeared on the screen. I paused the TV. Annual? Nobody had ever mentioned evacuation drills. Curious, I submitted a public records request for the emergency program as part of a school government project. I expected boring paperwork. Instead, I received hundreds of pages. Buried inside was one report from the exact week I'd attended camp. According to the timeline, emergency officials briefly believed an airborne chemical leak might drift toward our area. The threat ended before reaching the camp, but while officials were still unsure, our camp had secretly activated its evacuation protocol. That's why the trailers arrived. That's why counselors kept counting us. That's why there were 2 attendance lists, the public camper roster and the evacuation accountability list used to identify every child if transportation became necessary. I thought that finally explained everything. Until I reached the last page. It listed every camper assigned to my cabin. There should have been 8 names. There were only 7. Mine wasn't missing. Tyler's wasn't missing. Nobody else's was either. Instead, there was an 8th line with no name at all. Just one sentence typed in bold. One unregistered minor entered the evacuation zone during accountability verification. Identity never established. Individual departed before law enforcement interviews began. I called 3 people from my cabin. None of them remembered emergency vehicles. None remembered extra attendants. None remembered the storm. But every single one of them paused when I asked one question. "Do you remember somebody else hanging around our cabin?" Every one of them answered exactly the same way. "I know what you mean. I just can't picture who it was.